Hey, everybody, and welcome back. For this deep dive, we're going to be looking at one of the classics, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. It's a book I have to admit I had heard of, but never actually read cover to cover before. But wow, some of these excerpts you picked out are really resonating with me.
It's a book that's had such a profound impact on so many people, and for good reason, I think. Covey really goes deep. He's not just giving us these surface-level tips and tricks. He's talking about principles, building a foundation for effectiveness that really lasts.
Yeah, and that's what struck me, too, this idea of the character ethic versus the personality ethic. It's so easy to get caught up in, trying to perfect our image or become more charismatic.
Right.
But Covey's saying that's not really where lasting change comes from.
It's like he says, you can't just slap on a new coat of paint and expect the whole structure to be sound. You got to start with the foundation, the underlying character.
And he uses that analogy of the map, right?
Oh, absolutely. The map analogy is so powerful.
Like if you're using the wrong map, you can be putting in all this effort, all this energy, but you're never going to reach your destination.
Exactly. You'll be working hard, maybe even making progress in a sense, but you're headed in the wrong direction.
Oof. Yeah, that's kind of a scary thought.
It is, and that's why Covey says it's so important to examine our paradigms, our mental models of the world. Are they serving us, or are they leading us astray?
So it's about making sure our internal compass, our core principles, are aligned with where we want to go.
Precisely, and that's why that whole idea of proactivity is so essential. It's the first habit for a reason.
Right. Be proactive. That's where it all begins. And I love that story he tells about the business leaders during the recession.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one.
One group's reacting to every bit of bad news, all doom and gloom.
Right, just totally reactive.
And the other group, they acknowledge the reality, but then they shift into, okay, what can we control in this situation? How can we be proactive?
And that's the key difference, isn't it? It's not about denying reality, it's about choosing our response.
And the thing is, that proactive group, they're the ones who ended up not just surviving, but thriving.
Because they focused their energy on what they could influence, on what they could control.
They're a circle of influence, as Covey calls it.
Exactly. Instead of getting bogged down by all the things outside of their control, they honed in on where they could actually make a difference.
And that's such a powerful shift in perspective, isn't it? Instead of feeling like victims of circumstance, we become active agents in our own lives.
Absolutely. And it's not always easy. Sometimes our circumstances are really, really tough. But even then, even in the midst of difficulty, we always have a choice.
A choice in how we respond.
Exactly.
And that choice, that's where our power lies.
It really does. It's about recognizing that we are not just leaves blowing in the wind. We have agency. We can choose our direction. We can choose our response. Even when it feels like everything around us is falling apart, we can still choose how we show up in that moment. And that is incredibly empowering.
It's like we're not just reacting to life anymore. We're actually designing it,
And that leads us right into habit 2. Begin with the end in mind.
Okay, so this one, I have to admit, when I first read it, that whole visualization of your own funeral is like, whoa, this is a little intense.
It's definitely a powerful image.
It is. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized it's not really about death at all. It's about life.
Exactly. It's about clarifying what really matters to you. What do you want your life to stand for?
Yeah, like when all is said and done, what do you want people to say about you? What kind of impact do you want to have made? And then the real question is, are you living in a way that's aligned with that?
Right. It's about that alignment between our values and our actions, between our daily lives and our long-term vision. And, that's where Covey's suggestion to write a personal mission statement can be so helpful.
It's not just some woo-woo self-help exercise. It's about getting crystal clear on your direction in life.
Exactly. It's about defining your own personal constitution. What are your guiding principles? What do you stand for? What legacy do you want to leave behind? Having that clarity can be incredibly empowering, especially when faced with difficult decisions or challenging situations. It's like having that internal compass.
Right. It's like, okay, this is my North Star. This is what I'm working towards.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this solid foundation. We're clear on our values. We're being proactive. And then Covey throws us habit 3. Put first things first.
Which is where the rubber really meets the road, right?
Right. Because it's all well and good to have these big picture ideals, but how do we actually put them into practice in our day-to-day lives?
And that's where Covey's time management matrix is so brilliant.
With the 4 quadrants.
Yes. Urgent, not urgent. Important, not important.
And it's funny how quickly you can see where you tend to spend most of your time and energy.
Right. And for a lot of us, it's in that quadrant of Urgent, but not important.
Oh, totally. It's like we're so used to reacting to the latest email or the loudest demand on our
Yeah,
attention.
but are those things actually moving us closer to our goals? To the things that really matter?
Exactly. And then we end up neglecting those quadrant 2 activities, the ones that are important but not urgent.
Like long-term planning, relationship building, taking care of our health and well-being.
The things that are easy to put off, but that ultimately make the biggest difference in our lives.
It's about playing the long game, not just fighting fires all the time, but making time for what truly
But
matters.
how do we actually do that, though? Because
Yeah,
it's so easy to say, okay, I'm going to prioritize quadrant 2, but then life happens.
it takes a conscious effort for sure. It's about being intentional with our time and our energy. Scheduling those important but not urgent activities into our week, just like we would any other important appointment, and then learning to say no to the things that are pulling us away from our priorities.
Which is easier said than done sometimes, right?
Oh, absolutely. It takes practice, but the more we do it, the easier it gets. And the rewards are immense,
Yes.
because when we're living in alignment with our values, when we're making time for the things that truly matter, that's when we feel that sense of peace, purpose, and fulfillment. That's when we're truly thriving.
So we're being proactive, we're aligned with our values, we're prioritizing effectively. Now, how does all of this translate to our interactions with others? Because Covey doesn't just stop at personal effectiveness, he goes on to talk about what he calls public victory.
Right, because ultimately our lives are lived in relationship with others.
And that's where habits 4, 5, and 6 come in.
Exactly. These habits are all about building effective interdependence, recognizing that our greatest successes often come from collaboration, from synergy.
And it all starts with habit 4, think win-win, which is another one of those Coveyisms that's kind of seeped into our everyday language.
It has, hasn't it?
But what does it actually mean to think win-win, especially in situations where it feels like there's a clear winner and loser?
Well, it starts with a fundamental shift in mindset. It's about moving away from that scarcity mentality of either you get what you want or I do. It's about believing that there's enough for everyone, that we can find solutions that work for everyone involved.
So it's not about compromising or settling. It's about finding those creative solutions where everybody benefits.
Exactly. And a big part of that is really understanding the other person's perspective. What are their needs? What are their concerns? What are they trying to achieve?
It's like that saying, seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Which happens to be habit 5.
Of course. Covey was way ahead of us, wasn't he?
He really was.
Okay, so we're thinking win-win, we're seeking to understand, but sometimes, even with the best of intentions, communication can still break down. So what do we do when we find ourselves in those situations where it feels like we're talking past each other?
That's where Covey's analogy of the emotional bank account can be so helpful.
Ooh, yeah, I love this one. It's like we have these invisible bank accounts with the people in our lives.
And every interaction we have is either a deposit or a withdrawal.
So when we're kind, considerate, when we really listen, when we follow through on our commitments, those are all deposits. And then when we're disrespectful, inconsiderate, when we break promises, those are withdrawals.
Exactly. And just like with a financial bank account, the more deposits we make, the more trust and goodwill we build up.
And that surplus of trust becomes invaluable when conflicts inevitably arise.
Yeah.
Because we've built up that reservoir of goodwill.
We can navigate those disagreements from a place of mutual respect and understanding, knowing that, hey, we may disagree on this particular issue, but our relationship is strong enough to weather the storm.
It's like we're building that foundation of trust that allows us to have those tough conversations without, completely derailing the relationship.
Exactly, because conflict is inevitable, right? But it doesn't have to be destructive. In fact, when handled well, conflict can actually lead to deeper understanding and even stronger relationships.
Okay, so we're thinking win-win. We're making deposits into those emotional bank accounts. We're seeking first to understand. And that brings us to habit 6, synergize.
Which is really the culmination of all the previous habits, isn't it? It's about recognizing that when we come together with that foundation of trust, with a genuine desire to understand each other's perspectives, we can create something truly extraordinary.
So it's not about compromising or settling for the lowest common denominator. It's about leveraging our differences to create solutions that are better than anything we could have come up with on our own.
It's that beautiful idea that 1 + 1 can equal 3 or even more.
Right. And I love that example Covey gives of the company president who's in this really tough contract negotiation.
Yes, that's a good one.
And instead of just trying to bully his way through or even just trying to find a middle ground, He takes the time to really understand the other party's needs and concerns. And in doing so, he uncovers this whole new solution that nobody had even thought of before.
It's about recognizing that everyone has something valuable to contribute, even if it's not immediately apparent.
And that when we open ourselves up to that possibility, to that synergy, that's when the real magic happens.
Absolutely. It's about moving from that scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, believing that there's enough for everyone, that we can achieve more together than we ever could alone.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from building a strong character foundation to mastering the art of interpersonal effectiveness. But there's one more habit, right? Habit 7, sharpen the saw,
Ah, yes, the habit of renewal.
which I love because it reminds us that we can't pour from an empty cup.
We can't give what we don't have.
Exactly. We can't show up as our best selves in our relationships, in our work, in any area of our lives if we're not taking care of ourselves.
And that means taking care of ourselves on all levels, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
So that looks like what? Getting enough sleep, eating well, exercising regularly.
Absolutely. Those are all essential for physical renewal. But it's also about nurturing our mental and emotional well-being, making time for activities that bring us joy, that help us de-stress, that challenge us intellectually.
And not neglecting that spiritual side either, right? Whether it's through meditation, prayer, spending time in nature, whatever helps us connect with something larger than ourselves.
Exactly. It's about taking care of the whole person.
Because when we do that, when we prioritize our own well-being, it creates this ripple effect that impacts every other area of our lives.
We show up with more energy, more patience, more creativity, more compassion for ourselves and for others.
And that's ultimately what it's all about, right? Living a life that's both effective and fulfilling. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Covey's 7 habits, I'm curious, what's resonating most with you? What's one small step you can take this week to start integrating these principles into your own life? Maybe it's identifying a quadrant 2 activity you've been neglecting, or making a conscious effort to practice empathy in your conversations. Whatever it is, remember that even small changes consistently applied can lead to remarkable results over time. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep exploring the boundless possibilities of a life lived with purpose,